Hi, everybody. Welcome to this week's session of Healing from the Inside Out. And today I'm joined by my co host, Leslie Gaudet. So, today we're going to dive into one of those areas where we feel people are a little underserved. So, let's dive in. Hey, Leslie, how's it going?
Hey, Andra, I'm doing great. How are you doing today?
I'm doing very well, all things considered.
Yeah, International Women's Day. It's amazing that we only have one day, but that's for another conversation. I feel like I think Women's Day should be every day since women do so much for the for communities in general. So, but that's another conversation.
I happen to agree, but I didn't even realize it was National Women's Day until I saw your post, and then I was like, oh no, there's so many people I need to love on. So we decided that this week we were going to do modern day slavery, and I kind of got the idea from someone that I work with. My dog's here. Someone that I work with, they were going over it with a class. She's a teacher and I work with her indirectly. And she was saying that, that she's just appalled at modern day slavery. Someone told her that she should do that as a lesson. And I said, really? So she gave me a video to watch on YouTube, and I was just appalled at what I saw. So, in your research, what did you find that upset you the most? Because you don't think of slavery still going on today. Of course, you think of those sweatshops, but some of
Mhm.
the other things that I heard in this video, I was like, oh my God.
Yeah. I mean, slave labor actually it even encompasses sex trafficking, right? Because people are forced into um, you know, becoming sex workers, you know. I really just and they're forced to do things against their will. A lot of the time, even being perhaps sold into slavery because, well, their family's trying to get by. They're poor. There's a lot of, I think, factors that can actually contribute to that. But I think for me, to know really one thing that really upset me that I came across, just knowing that there are so many countries around the world that are still exploiting people, but the USA is also one of those countries, which for me is upsetting just because you think that we're supposed to be that much further ahead in our thinking, where this is a place where people want to come. They think of the American dream. They want to go to the USA because this is where all dreams are possible. And yet there are people still that end up here in the United States that are forced into, some type of forced labor, whether it's as a sex, under sex worker or other things like just doing forced labor for low wages. And when you know that, and especially when you realize, okay, even the United States understands that they've even created, there are organizations out there. One I came across was Green America. They are Green America's labor program. They highlight labor abuses that affect workers throughout the world. So it's like it's on people's minds, but how how are we going? I think the question for me, it becomes, how are we still in a place like this where people are forced into to become, being like forced labor or forced into doing something they don't want to do because of a family member has sold them into slavery, or forced to be forced to endure really bad conditions, working conditions, long hours in like you were saying, sweatshops, places where it's hot, there's no ventilation, they probably don't have enough hydration. I can't even imagine what that would be like, because I'm fortunate. I live here in the United States, and my life is pretty good, but there are still people in this country that we know that aren't. So that kind of really upset me. I don't know. What about you when you were looking?
I think the numbers just kind of made my eyes roll back in my head because if when and first glance when I was first looking it up, I was getting numbers like 50 million. But the video I was talking about was 10 examples of modern day slavery. And 168 million kids are into like forced child labor, right? So they were talking about Africa, and there's a country I've never heard of it before I watched that video. I'm not big on geography. You you Pakistan use
Oh,
back
it was Pakistan, yeah.
Uzbekistan. So
It's
they're
Pakistan, yeah.
so they have a lot of child labor for the cotton fields, and these kids are taken out of school and they're forced to work. And then they were
Hmm.
talking about India. Um, so they were talking about sweatshops, and they mentioned a store that I used to frequent, which I will not be frequenting anymore. They were talking about H&M and how many people are really in these poor working conditions. Something like 200 people passed out in one day because they're not allowed to drink water. I guess
Hmm.
that's to discourage them to go to the bath from going to the bathroom, and they're working like 16-hour days. And these, they take people from other countries, um, immigrants, people that are not born here, that don't have papers and things like that. But there were other different kinds that they discussed, which was even more concerning. So a lot of this is happening again to women and children.
Hmm. Hmm.
Okay. There's a lot of countries where the men are the dominant. So they were talking about another form of slavery, which is forced marriage, right? Places like Pakistan. And, when you look, like they showed a picture of a man that looked like he was 60, and he was so much bigger than this child. I mean, clearly it was a child. So when they were talking about child labor, they were talking about kids 5 to 11. When they were talking about marriages, we're talking about people under 18, but this child looked like she was about 9. And then they're, forced into marriage. So there's a big difference between arranged marriage, where a lot of times it's a cultural thing and they do both agree, even if they're not okay with it, and
Hmm.
then someone telling you have to marry this person, and they're forced into a marriage with someone they don't love. And then there was debt debt slavery, where people, their countries are so poor they have to work f- to survive, and what they owe doesn't I mean is far less than the amounts of work that they have to do, and unfortunately they never pay it off. And then they were talking about the textile industries, like you were mentioning, and they mentioned Dubai, which is a beautiful place. But they were talking about how they bring people over, immigrants with no papers, and
Hmm.
their passports are taken from them, and they have to work, and the money that they're getting paid is really sub level. It's not fair wages. I mean, in India they're making maybe $2 an hour. Some of them are getting $60 a month for it's just absurd,
Hmm.
some of the things. And they talk about I heard them on another one, because they have a lot of them. Another episode was talking about how Australia filed this act, this new law, modern day slavery 2018, to help. You know, so if people are making like 100 million a day, like there's stricter guidelines. They have to show where the workers are coming from, and I don't know. It was just very, very heart wrenching. And when you think about so they were talking about the prostitution, people being forced into prostitution. They were talking about sex trafficking, that a lot of these people come over, promised a job, and now they're in this place and their IDs are taken and they have no way home. But they were also talking about servitude, like people that come here thinking they're going to be a nanny, and they're given a roof over their head and they're forced to work, and they're not getting paid. They're not being fed properly. They're being poorly managed, and it's just horrible. And they were saying, these people, you might see them and think they're the butler or something, but these people aren't being paid. They're slaves.
Yeah. And when you think about that, again, bringing it back to the country that we live in, why would this be happening here? Now, I'm not saying that, oh, because another country that I expect it to be happening there, but because I live here and to me, this affects it affects women, it affects children, the most vulnerable. Why is it happening here when we have laws in place, when people speak up about this, and yet behind closed doors, this is allowed? I don't, it boggles my mind to know that you could actually watch someone come into your country, welcome them into your country. Publicly, people are around you, and it looks like you're greeting someone with kindness. And then once you get them into your home, it's a whole different story. That I can't imagine that. I can't imagine where is this coming from, because we are not living back in the days, back during, you know, the 17th century, when slavery, here in this country was, for 300, like how many years? It was 300, I believe, a little over 300 years. There was slavery for African Americans. And
There's
well,
still a lot of
probably
that going on in Africa. That was on that video too,
exactly.
that
The
these
thing is
kids
when
are born into it.
Right. And the thing is, what's really interesting to me is I learned something that around slavery itself, in that the first slave was a king, and it was from Africa, was a king. And this is what I had learned recently. And I don't know his name, but he he brought slavery into his land by saying, don't take me, every year I'll provide you with a certain amount of people that you can take. Well, once that became, I guess, profitable, they kept coming back for more and more and more. And of course, we know what happened. Slavery became a very, rich, abundant money making thing for people who wanted people to do their work for them for free. And but they took these people who were vulnerable, who didn't know their customs, their language, and made them become servants to them, like even probably below a servant, I would say, because a servant, I think, would at least be treated with a little more respect. But what really, like, I guess, what gets to me is knowing that it's like that. I'm bringing it to that story because it's like like we're aware, and we're letting, it's almost like we're letting these things happen right under our noses. And I feel like what I love about what you're doing here is you're saying we need to bring these stories forward and start talking about our responsibility as well
We have
to
to speak
making
up.
change, right? Because if we don't, then who's going to? I'm not saying I'm sure there are a lot of other people out there that are talking about it, but I really believe that it needs to be talked about more and more
More.
and more.
And collectively, and because these are crimes, I mean, slavery is a crime against everybody, okay? But
Mhm.
it's against your human rights, your civil rights. You're stealing a life. You're not stealing a couple of hours or work. You're stealing their entire life. There's a
Mhm.
difference. And you're demoralizing them. It doesn't even make sense. They should be held accountable. So, but after everything that would, went on during slavery and everything else. We're supposed to be progressing forward, and we're coming back, even this whole Roe versus Wade thing, right? I mean, you know, I don't even understand how this got back to that. But this modern day slavery has been going on for a really long time. So they were talking about our iPhones being made, with people. And I'm like,
Mhm.
everything they were talking about, a lot of this stuff, like, you know, um, you wouldn't think. But even service providers in restaurants, well, I mean, I waitressed for years, and we got under minimum wage because we made really great tips. But that's not the point. They're doing it with migrants and people, and a lot of times they're giving them a place to stay, and they're withholding their pay, so they can't. So people come here to better themselves, and they're not. They're held captive. They're not getting better. They're getting sub level life. Someone's
Mhm.
robbing their life and keeping them stuck in what is a worse situation than they left. I would think. I'm sure they weren't slaves at home. Um, but even in Africa, I was very surprised to hear the things that are still going on there, where um a lot of them are born. So there's debt slavery, where people are in slavery. They're indentured servants, maybe because they were working for food, or what I was saying before, to stay alive, and they didn't pay it off. So then their family is born into that slavery. It was bizarre. And in
Mhm.
Africa, that's going on still, and they have no names, they have no birth certificates, and
Mhm.
when they're not able to work, they're just tossed out.
Yeah, no, it's really sad. And you know what? It's when you as you were speaking, I was just looking this up, and you know, specifically what stood out to me from before even clicking on the link was that it was saying like some countries like India, Nepal, and Ghana have a ritual religion-based slavery in which young girls are provided as sexual slaves. Still, so like I said, I don't know what world we live in when I think about these things. And I guess I feel almost um not ashamed, but I really feel like I need to educate myself more. And I not only do I need to educate myself more, but I need to get involved more. You know,
Absolutely.
today being International Women's Day should, not just be where we're celebrating each other, but we should be what can we do to make a difference in the things that we know are going on in this world, including in people who are, again, like you were saying, debt slavery to forced into prostitution or forced into labor where they're working in really poor conditions. They don't have, they're not given water because that would then take away some of their working time to allowing them to have these unimaginable conditions where here in this country, we would be all up in arms over that. And
But it's
yet
happening here in this
it
country. So,
is. And that's the
so
thing.
a lot of it is politics, because the labor is needed, so they sweep things under the rug. When
Mhm.
it's, do as I say, not as I do, type of thing. And to me, that's even more deplorable, because and these people are living in deplorable situations. Even you hear about them taking in all these migrants, and a lot of them are sleeping on the street. What are we really providing them? It's not better. So you shouldn't take people in if you can't provide that service. You should be, once you accept them, you should be held accountable to provide, right? So there's
Mhm.
there's a lot of very shady things going on with politics. Yes, I'm talking to you, President. I'm talking to all of them. I really believe that these people in the White House and on the Senate, they serve way too long. I think that if you can only be president for 8 years, you should only be able to serve on the Senate and or any of these parties for 8 years, and then you should be gone. They should bring in new blood, new ideas, and this way, because it gets very corrupt. They learn what they can take from, borrow from here to give to here, I think there's a lot of shady shenanigans going on, you know.
Hmm.
So that's my view on politics. I'm not big on politics. I don't trust any of them. I think if you're a politician, you're as crooked as the day is long. But it's very disturbing that these things are going on in modern day, and I think that we just have to keep speaking about it, and we have to get more people, because we've been talking about foster care, we've been talking about sex slave. So why aren't these people? I mean, they are the underserved. No one's speaking for them. Pakistan, well, these things. If here in America, if you had a child bride, if she was 13 years old, we'd call you a pedophile. So why is that
Hmm.
acceptable in another country? It's not, because that child, you're robbing that childhood. She's not even
Hmm.
fully developed, and you're forcing her to have children and marriage and stuff like that. It's unacceptable, the damage
Yeah.
that they're doing to this child's body. It's
Yeah.
it's not acceptable. And
Yeah. I mean,
it's go ahead.
yeah, and when you think about the emotional toll as well, right? Just on people and their communities too, because thinking about like, and you're in the health profession, so you see a lot of people who experience stress. Stress seems is such a huge factor in people going to the doctor. Work-related stress, work-related uh death from work-related stress. People are stressed just in general over life. And when you add in stuff like this, you've got that severe stress, you've got that anxiety, you've got that depression. It has that long-term effect because especially if it's women and children, the most vulnerable, who cannot speak for themselves, who cannot stand up for themselves, then you're also having to figure out like, okay, we're going to help you, but on top of that, it's not just about getting them out. It's like, how do you then take the next steps, right? Because like as a nurse, someone comes in and they're not feeling well. It's not that you send them out the door with an aspirin. It's like you go through, figure out what's wrong. How can I help you? I know you personally would want to go that extra level deep to see the underlying issue, not just put a band-aid on it. And this is what's happening from what I'm seeing and what I would understand, even just coming from trauma myself, and you've experienced trauma in your life, that if we don't deal with that and slap a band-aid on it, you've got people are going to be wounded for their entire lives. And what's that going to do? It's just going to create more wounded people because they won't know any different. They won't know how to make change. It's going to impact their communities. It's really, for me, I think it goes just beyond the idea of talking about it, making change, like, talking to your political figures, as close even down to your officials in your city or your town,
Unions, you got to talk to unions,
unions,
you got
all
to
of
get
them. I
unions
mean,
involved.
yeah, like talking to all these people is great, but what's next? Because it's not just slapping a band-aid on and just putting, for example, putting someone away, putting someone in jail for doing something that's wrong. It's like, how do you now, these people that were affected, what are you going to do to help them? Because it's going to affect generations of people, their children,
But
if
it is generations, because a lot of these things, they are cultural practices, like you were talking about Ghana and stuff. So it's very common for someone in Pakistan to be forced into marriage at 12 or 13 years old. She's not fully
Mhm.
developed, she's not enjoying a childhood, maybe she's not finishing school, and then she's raising a child of her own with a man that she potentially doesn't love. So is that traumatizing? Of course it's traumatizing,
Mhm.
but we have to do more. So we do have to talk more. I am going to ask the audience to really comment below this video when you see it if you have any ideas of what we can do as a community to make change, because it really does begin and end with us. It's one thing to talk about it, but we have to pursue it and find out ways that we can help and give these people back their voice, because a lot of them live in countries where it's male dominated, and they're really not looked at as people, unfortunately. And that is very unnerving for me. It pisses me off. And I don't know. But I do have another show to do very soon. I'm gonna go from one to the other because I'm a crazy lady sometimes. So yeah, I'm doing a show after this on how to read people, how to effectively communicate without words, which I think is an exciting topic.
Yeah, yeah,
So
absolutely.
I think we should definitely do a follow-up on this though. See what we can do from a union perspective, because this is a civil rights issue, a human rights. It
Hmm.
is, unions are part of this, and nobody's complaining to, so we have a war going on and there's a new presidency, so they're talking about how they can send money over there and how they can build another wall and do all these things because they want to get in the White House, but after that everything goes back to normal, and they're not, this isn't even on the table. So we have to find out how we get that on the table, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think it starts with educating yourself. Find out what's really going on around you in your community and pay attention because there could be things happening right under your nose and you don't even know it. But if you start paying attention, I think that's the first step. What I loved, like you'd shared in a previous video, is that, you said people would get sent to your home to have, if there was something going on, or people would know in your neighborhood if something was going on, who to reach out to, like which family member, or talk to this person's parent, or there was a tight-knit community. People actually supported each other. And I think we've gotten away from that. So I think it's really like going back to that community aspect of supporting each other, like being true to that sign that says neighborhood watch. Be true to that. Pay attention, educate yourself. We can and start talking amongst yourselves. Like, how can we as a community make change? I think that's where we start.
I think that's a great idea. I missed that. That was a great community. We are going to close on that note. I want to thank you so much for coming in and spending time with me, my co-host. She always just adds so much value to all of our sessions, and I hope you have a great night. Take care.